A genius janitor solves a theorem that stumped MIT's greatest minds. Now, his only choice is between a life in prison or a life he doesn't believe he deserves. You know, some people are born into their destiny. It's laid out for them like a neat, straight path. School, college, a good job, it's all expected. But for others, destiny is a whisper in a room they're not supposed to be in. It's a secret they keep, even from themselves. This is a story about one of those secrets. His name was Liam Evans. If you saw him at 20 years old, you'd think you had him all figured out. He lived in a neighborhood where the buildings were their age like bruises, and he spent his days with his friends Mark and the others, talking big dreams in a world that felt very, very small. But every night, Liam would walk to the towering iron gates of the Meridian Institute of Technology, MIT for short. The most brilliant minds in the country studied there. And Liam? He worked there. He was a janitor. He'd push his mop bucket through the silent, hallowed halls, the squeak of his wheels echoing against portraits of famous scientists. He'd wipe down blackboards still dusty with the ghosts of equations that could change the world. And in the quiet, he'd read the books the students left behind. He was like a ghost himself, absorbing knowledge no one thought he could possibly understand. One Tuesday, everything changed. He was cleaning the corridor outside the advanced mathematics lecture hall when he saw it. A complex theorem, scrawled in precise white chalk across the board. At the top was a note from the renowned Professor Arthur Reed. To the gifted student who solves this by the semester's end, you'll earn not only my respect but a publication in the Institute's journal. Your name will be recorded here among the greats. Liam stopped. The mop handle went slack in his hand. He wasn't looking at the words. He was looking at the puzzle. The numbers and symbols swirled in front of him, and something deep inside his mind, a part he usually kept locked away, clicked into gear. He could almost see the solution, like a shape hidden in the clouds. It was beautiful. And for a kid who dreamed of one day working on rockets, of maybe, just maybe, touching the stars, this felt like the first step. He couldn't stop thinking about it all day. That night, at their usual dive bar, the noise of his friends' laughter faded into a dull hum. The problem was all he could see. He was scribbling on a napkin, lost in a world of his own. "Liam, you in there, man?" Mark asked, waving a hand in front of his face. Liam looked up, his eyes wide. I gotta go." He didn't explain. He just left, rushing back to his cramped, shabby apartment. He didn't have a blackboard. So he used what he had, the bathroom mirror. With a dry erase marker, he began to work. Solution after solution, each one getting closer. When he was wrong, he'd simply wipe the steam away with his sleeve and start again. The night bled into morning, but he didn't care. He was flying. And then, just as the sun began to lighten the sky, he found it. The answer. It was so simple, so elegant. He couldn't believe it had taken him all night. He stood back, looking at his reflection framed by the proof. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something like pride. A few days later, on his weekend shift, he did it. The halls were empty. Heart thumping in his chest, he walked up to the board, erased a small corner, and in quick, sure strokes, he wrote the solution. Then he went back to mopping the floor, the ghost once more. The following Monday, Professor Reed found it. He stared at the board, his mouth agape. This wasn't just a solution. It was a work of art. It was solved with an intuition he hadn't seen in decades. "Who did this?" he demanded of his teaching assistant, his voice a hushed whisper of awe. "Jack, was it you?" "Wasn't me, Professor." Reed was thrilled. A genius was hiding in his class, and he was determined to find them. But that genius was in a world of trouble. That same evening, Liam was out with his friends when they passed a group of guys. One of them shouted a crude insult at a girl with them. Liam froze. He recognized the guy. It was someone from his childhood, a bully who had made his early years a living hell. All the old anger, the feeling of being powerless, surged up in him. "Stop the car," Liam said, his voice dangerously calm. "Liam, don't." But he was already out. He walked right up to the bully and, without a word, punched him square in the face. A chaotic brawl erupted under the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights. When the police sirens wailed, Mark tried to pull Liam away, but it was too late. The cops hauled Liam off, his knuckles bleeding, his eyes burning with fury that had nothing to do with the fight, and everything to do with a past he couldn't escape. The next morning, as Liam sat in a cold jail cell, Professor Reed stood before his packed lecture hall. "Well," he began, a smile on his face, "I doubt you've all come to hear me lecture. You're here to ascertain the identity of our mystery math magician." He looked around the room, expecting a hand to shoot up, but no one moved. The genius was staying silent. "Well, I'm sorry to disappoint the spectators," Reed said, a little deflated. Then a new idea sparked his eyes. If this problem wasn't hard enough, he would find one that was. He gestured to the board. "There's a problem on the board right now that took me and my colleagues more than 2 years to prove. Let's see if our ghost can solve this." He had no idea that his ghost was currently being processed for arrest. The brilliant mind that had solved his first puzzle now focused only on survival in a concrete box. The two worlds were about to collide, and the quiet halls of MIT would never be the same again. Life has a way of slamming doors. Just as one cracks open, just as a sliver of light gets in, another one booms shut, leaving you in the dark again. For Liam, that first door was a chalkboard, a place where he could speak without using his voice, where he could be brilliant without anyone ever seeing his face. And now it was gone. He walked out of the police station the next morning, the city air feeling heavy and accusing. Mark was waiting for him, his face etched with worry. "Court date's in a week," Liam muttered, sliding into the passenger seat. He didn't look at his friend. He felt a hot shame that had nothing to do with the arrest and everything to do with feeling like he'd let Mark down, like he confirmed every low expectation the world had for him. But a part of him, the stubborn, secret part, still itched. That evening, he headed to MIT for what he knew was his last shift. He'd been fired. "Management is restructuring," he'd told his friends with a hollow laugh. The truth was, he was a liability. The halls were quiet, and there, on the same board, was a new problem. Professor Reed's second challenge. It was even more complex, a labyrinth of logic that made the first one look like child's play. Without thinking, drawn by a force he couldn't resist, Liam picked up a piece of chalk. The familiar rhythm took over. The numbers flowed from him, a silent song only he could hear. He was so absorbed, he didn't hear the office door open. "What are you doing?" Liam froze. Professor Reed stood there, his eyes narrowed, not in recognition, but in annoyance. He saw a janitor, a vandal, defacing intellectual property. "Sorry," Liam mumbled, dropping the chalk and turning to leave. "That's people's work. You get graffiti somewhere else. Don't you walk away from me." Reed snapped, moving to block his path. But Liam was young and fast. He ducked around Professor and vanished down the corridor, his heart hammering not from fear, but from a strange, defiant thrill. Professor Reed, fuming, turned back the board to erase the graffiti. And then he saw it. The solution. It was correct. More than correct, it was inspired. "Oh my God," he whispered, his anger evaporating into stunned disbelief. The ghost wasn't a student. The ghost was a janitor. The hunt was on. The next day, Reed went to the janitorial office. "I need the name of a student who works the evening shift on the North Wing," he said, trying to sound casual. The supervisor, assuming the professor was there to complain, was defensive at first. It took some doing, but Reed finally pieced it together. The boy's name was Liam Evans, and he hadn't been working there voluntarily. It was court-ordered community service. Fate, it seemed, was insisting on an introduction. That very day was Liam's hearing. Professor Reed entered the courtroom just in time to see Liam defending himself. But he wasn't using a lawyer. He was representing himself, and he was doing it with a breathtaking command of legal precedent and sociological theory. "By the Constitution of the United States," Liam argued, his voice clear and steady, "liberty, in case you've forgotten, is a soul's right to breathe." Reed watched, mesmerized. The raw, untamed intellect was staggering. But the judge, unmoved by the young man's brilliance, read out a long list of prior offenses. The weight of Liam's past was too heavy. The motion to dismiss was denied. Liam was going to jail. It was a hard, cold defeat. But Professor Reed saw something else, a diamond in the roughest of rough. He pulled strings, called in favors. A few days later, Liam had a visitor in his cell. It was the professor. "The judge has agreed to release you into my custody," Reed said, getting straight to the point. "There are 2 conditions. First, you meet with me weekly to study mathematics. Second, you meet with a therapist to work on this." He gestured at the cell around them. Liam's eyes were guarded, hostile. "I don't need a shrink." "It's not a request, Liam. It's the deal. Take it or you stay in here." Freedom was a powerful motivator. Liam took the deal. And so his new life began. The sessions with Professor Reed were a revelation. Liam solved advanced problems with an ease that was almost supernatural. Reed was like a kid in a candy store, thrilled by the sheer power of the mind he had uncovered. But therapy was a war zone. The first psychologist fled after Liam, having read the man's life's work the night before, mockingly analyze him. The second tried hypnosis, and Liam faked a traumatic memory. So convincingly the session ended in a panic. Reed was ready to give up. Then he remembered an old friend from his own college days, a man who was as unbreakable as he was kind. Dr. Sean Miller. Sean was a therapist living with his own deep grief, the loss of his wife. He was reluctant, but Reed pleaded. "This boy, his genius is unparalleled, Sean. He's like one of those prodigies who discovers galaxies with a telescope he built from scrap, but he's drowning. You're the only one I know who can teach him how to swim." The first session was a battle of wills. Liam immediately went on the attack, mocking the books on the shelf, the degrees on the wall. He zeroed in on a painting Sean had done. "This is crap," Liam said, a smirk on his face. "You ever think about sticking to your day job?" Sean didn't flinch. He let the insults wash over him. But when Liam, digging for a weakness, made a sarcastic comment about Sean's late wife, the therapist finally snapped. He moved with a startling speed, grabbing Liam by the throat, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "If you ever disrespect my wife again, I will end you." He released him and calmly said, "Time's up." Afterwards, a shaken Professor Reed saw Sean's anger. "You can quit, Sean. I'll find someone else." But Sean Miller looked at the closed door, a thoughtful expression on his face. "No, Thursday. Make sure he's here." Meanwhile, life outside therapy was getting complicated. Liam, emboldened by something he couldn't name, asked out a girl named Chloe he'd met at a bar. She was smart, funny, and from a world of money and privilege he could only imagine. She was planning to go to Stanford. They had a perfect evening, ending with a kiss under the neon sign of a diner. For a moment, Liam felt a happiness that wasn't about solving a problem or winning a fight. It was just simple. The second therapy session arrived. This time, Sean took Liam to a park bench. The open air was a stark contrast to the closed office. Liam started his usual routine, but Sean cut him off. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sean began, his gaze steady. "And I have something to say to you." What followed wasn't analysis. It was an annihilation. Sean looked right through Liam's intellect and saw the scared boy hiding behind it. "You can know about Michelangelo from a book," Sean said, his voice soft but firm. "You can list all his paintings, his techniques. But you've never stood in the Sistine Chapel and had your breath taken away. You can quote Shakespeare about love and loss, but you've never looked at a woman and been so terrified of losing her that your heart aches." He leaned in, "And I'll never know what it feels like to be an orphan, to be beaten and abandoned, because that's not in a book. That's here." Sean tapped his own chest. "So if I asked you about art or love, you could give me a textbook answer. But you can't tell me what it feels like to stand in front of a masterpiece, or to wake up next to someone you love, truly loved, and feel safe, because you don't know." Liam was silent, completely, utterly silent. The smirk was gone. The walls, for the first time, had crumbled, and he was left exposed. Sean simply sat with him in that silence, not pushing, just waiting. He had thrown down the gauntlet not as a therapist to a patient, but as one wounded soul to another. The real work was finally about to begin. There is a silence that is empty, and there is a silence that is full. The quiet that hung between Liam and Dr. Miller on that park bench was a full less kind. It was heavy with unspoken truths, with pain acknowledged, with the first fragile thread of connection. Liam didn't say a word for the rest of the session. He just sat there, the professor's brilliant prodigy finally rendered speechless not by a complex equation, but by a simple, devastating dose of reality. The next time they met, Liam broke the silence not with confession, but with a dirty joke. It was a test, a way to see if they could go back to something easier. But Sean Miller was too smart for that. He laughed, a real, genuine laugh, and then he steered the conversation gently, like a riverboat captain navigating a familiar current. He asked about girls. Liam cautiously mentioned Chloe. You gonna call her? Sean asked. Liam shrugged, looking away. I don't know. This girl is like perfect right now. I don't want to ruin that. Sean saw right through it. I think you're afraid you're not perfect, he said softly. That's what real intimacy is about, Liam. It's about letting someone see your cracks. Then Sean did something Liam never expected. He shared a story about his wife. Not about her death, but about her life. He told him about the funny little noises she made in her sleep, about how she could burn water while making pasta, about the way she'd steal his sweaters. Those are the things I miss the most, Sean said, his eyes glistening. The imperfections. That's the good stuff. For the first time, Liam didn't just hear the words. He felt them. They landed in a hollow place inside him and began to fill it. That evening, he went to Chloe's dorm. She was surprised to see him. You haven't called in a while, she said, her voice cautious. I know. I'm sorry. So, you want to go out? Maybe tomorrow. A slow smile spread across her face. Yeah, all right. Their next date was at the dog races. It was loud, messy, and wonderful. Chloe asked about his family. Liam, his heart in his throat, lied. He invented a wild story about a house full of older brothers, a chaotic but loving family. It was a shield, and he hated himself for raising it, especially when Chloe, her eyes shining, made him promise to introduce her to them soon. The lies created a pressure that began to build. Professor Reed, meanwhile, was growing impatient. He met with Sean at a diner, not to ask about Liam's well-being, but to check on his progress. Why don't we give him time to figure out what he wants? Sean argued, protective of the fragile trust they were building. Figure out what he wants? Reed snapped. I've shown him what's available. I've introduced him to people at the NSA, at aerospace firms. He didn't know that Liam, terrified of the commitment, had sent his friend Mark to those interviews instead. Mark, in over his head, had asked the executives for cash payments, ruining every opportunity with his well-meaning but clumsy behavior. The pressure exploded one night at Chloe's apartment. She asked him to come to California with her. The dream he'd secretly harbored was now a terrifying reality. Just come with me, she pleaded. I can't, he said, the excuses tumbling out. My friends, my job here. You're scared, she countered, seeing through him just as Sean had. You're scared because here, you're the smartest guy in the room. Out there, you might not be. Liam felt cornered. The walls went up higher and thicker than ever before. Why are you so obsessed with this? He yelled, deflecting. You with your trust fund. You'd never understand someone like me. I'll always just be the guy from the wrong side of the tracks to you. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. If I had to choose between my dad being alive and his money, I'd choose my dad in a heartbeat. I'm scared too, Liam, but I'm trying to be honest with you. Then she remembered his brothers. The lie. Tell me the truth, she whispered. And he did. He unleashed all of it. The foster homes, the abuse, the feeling of being worthless. He told her everything, not to be vulnerable, but as a weapon, to push her away, to show her how broken he really was. I don't love you, he spat, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He walked out, slamming the door on the one good thing in his life. He did the same with Professor Reed, screaming at him that he was ungrateful and that he never wanted the life Reed was offering. He was burning all his bridges, retreating to the only place that felt safe, the familiar. He started working construction with Mark. During a break, leaning against a half-built wall, Mark asked about his plans. Probably just make some good money here. Liam said, trying to sound convinced. Yeah, be a lab rat in this place? Mark joked, but then Mark's face grew serious. He looked at his best friend, and he delivered a truth that shattered Liam's world. You know what the best part of my day is? Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. It's the 10 seconds before I knock on your door. I let myself think, maybe I'll get up there and I'll knock, and you'll be gone. That you finally left this place behind without saying goodbye, because I know you got to do it, and I'd be happy for you. It was the most profound act of love Liam had ever known. His best friend's greatest dream was for him to disappear. The final piece fell into place in Sean's office. Professor Reed had come to confront Sean, accusing him of sabotaging Liam's future out of jealousy. The argument was fierce, but when Reed left, Sean was calm. Liam, who had witnessed the tail end of it, was confused. A lot of that stuff goes back a long way between me and him, Sean explained. Then he looked at Liam. It's not your fault. Liam smirked. Yeah, I know. No, Sean said, gently but firmly. Look at me. It's not your fault. He said again and again, each time chipping away at the fortress around Liam's heart. The smirk faded. The bravado crumbled. The words, simple and true, finally broke through. Liam's face contorted, and he collapsed into Sean's arms, sobbing like the lost, scared child he had always been. He was finally feeling the pain he had spent a lifetime running from. Weeks later, Liam came for his final session. He told Sean he'd taken a job with one of the companies Reed had suggested. He said he was happy. Sean, knowing better, simply nodded. He said he was going to travel for a while and left his number. That evening, Liam's friends threw him a birthday party. They presented him with a car they had built for him from scratch, a symbol of their unwavering, heartbreaking love. The next morning, as was his ritual, Mark drove up to Liam's apartment. He looked up at the window. The curtain was still. He smiled. His dream had come true. Professor Reed visited Sean one last time. The two old friends apologized, their rivalry finally put to rest. As they left for a drink, Sean checked his mailbox. There was an envelope from Liam. Inside was a note. Liam had quit the job. He was driving to California to find Chloe. He ended the note with the same words Sean had used about his wife. I sure as hell don't regret missing a damn game. Sean looked down the empty road, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. The ghost was gone. In his place was a man, finally chasing his future, not because he was running from his past, but because he had finally, bravely, chosen to feel. So, what do you think? Was it the equations on the board, or the connection he found on that park bench, that truly saved Liam Evans? Sometimes, the most complex problems in life aren't solved with a brilliant mind, but with a willing heart. If this story of second chances and finding your place in the world resonated with you, then like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear today. What's a moment that changed your life? Tell us in the comments below. And subscribe for more stories about the hidden genius in everyday lives.